Hi, my name is Becki McBride, and I am one of the occupational therapists here at Anna Shaw. And today, the title of my talk is Ready, Set, Write. We're going to talk about handwriting. Some things that we're going to look at is just the components of handwriting, what all plays into it. We're also going to look at some myth busters and then also just some resources really quickly. And I'm going to go over these in detail, but just when I talk about handwriting, I usually say there's a lot of different things that go into it. Um, First is the grasp, fine motor coordination or fine motor skills, visual motor skills or eye-hand coordination, visual perceptual skills, proximal stability or core strength, and attention and motivation. So the first one is grasp, and basically that is just how a child or an adult holds a pencil or crayon. I usually describe it as functional or not functional. Typically, well, it depends on how long a child has been writing or coloring, but it's usually pretty set around second grade. It's hard to really change that after that time. So I have some pictures here of what I would call a not functional grasp. This is what you may see with some little around 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds. But if you have a child that is above that age that is holding it with their full hand, either with their pinky side down or with their thumb side down, then that's what I would call a not a functional grasp. They're using their whole arm movements instead of their small hand muscles. Typically for this kind of grasp, if they're in pre-K or kindergarten, I'll recommend breaking crayons. That was when I worked in the schools, that was my favorite thing that I said. Usually when I walked into a preschool room is just break all the crayons into little pieces. When you have little pieces, then it forces children to hold the pieces with their fingers instead of their whole hand. Same thing with pencils. I recommend shortened pencils like golf pencils to promote that kind of grasp. Here's a couple of other pictures that you may see. Again, I wouldn't really call this a functional grasp. The one where they're holding their finger down or holding it at the end, like a paintbrush. So with this, again, I would recommend giving children shortened utensils, writing utensils. So the next couple are ones that look a little different, but they're still pretty functional. I wouldn't correct these unless a child is telling me that it's their hand is getting really tired or they're hurting or something like that. I would just leave these. I would call these a functional grasp. And the same thing with the next ones. And so the next ones are the functional grasp that you typically see more of. The one in the orange background and the greenish yellow background is what we call a tripod grasp. And that's what we usually try to work towards. And tripod just means those 3 fingers. A dynamic tripod, if you've ever heard those words, means that you separate the sides of your hand. And so you're looking at the fingers are holding the pencil, and then the other side of the hand is still against the palm. So you're just really moving those fingers that are holding the pencil. You may recognize a lot of these grips. A lot of times teachers or parents will give children these adaptive grips. I may recommend that for older kids. Most of the time, they get lost at school or the kids don't like using them or they don't like to be different. So most of the time, I will use these just for training purposes. And so this is for your older kids who have one of those pictures that was in the beginning. Either they're holding it with their whole hand or with their fingertips. And so I might use this. I like the one that's purple. It's called the claw. and it really kind of forces their children into using those three fingers. But I typically find that it's hard for kids to use them long term. So what we would want to do most of the time, the reason why kids are not holding it correctly is because they don't have that fine motor coordination. And so that's my next area that impacts handwriting. Fine motor coordination just means the coordination of the small muscles of your hand. And so the things that I usually look at when I'm assessing that, I'll look at the being able, I'm going to kind of show you if you can see the little picture of me. So I'm holding the pencil toward the writing end and then being able to turn my pen around to the eraser end and then turning it back around. So that's just an example of using those small muscles in my hand. What we might see is kids having trouble with that. They'll maybe use their body or use the table. Another example of the small muscles of your hands is picking things up one at a time. So like a coin bank, being able to pick up coins from the table one at a time and drop them into a coin bank one at a time. When I look at kids, sometimes they'll have trouble with that. They can't pick up more than one thing in their hand, or they're dropping them everywhere. And so if that's the case, these are some activities that I recommend with that. And so the first picture you see is just hammers. So kid-sized tools are really good. Hammering works on strength. This is a picture of actually little golf tees, and she's hammering them into foam board or cardboard. You can also do that into Play-Doh, works really well. Another activity that works on fine motor coordination is using either tongs, kid-sized tongs, tweezers, or clothespins. All of those promote that tripod grasp. And so in the picture, she's just picking up pom-poms and putting them in the next or in the container. Some other activities to work on those fine motor coordination skills are the eyedropper. And so again, that's that tripod grasp, the squeezing and putting the paint down, and then Play-Doh. Play-Doh is my favorite. You can hide things in them and have them find things, but just also just doing that strength with the Play-Doh, making different designs works well also. This is a picture of using a hole punch, and again, that's working on those strengthening skills. So being able to hold the paper with one hand and then punch with the other, again, kind of works on those fine motor and bilateral hand coordination that helps with writing. The next area is visual motor and visual perceptual skills. And all that those words mean, visual motor skills is just your eyes and hands working together. And then visual perceptual skills is the brain interpreting what our eyes see. It's not acuity and it's not corrected by glasses, but it's just that interpretation. So some things that are impacted by those visual motor skills and visual perceptual skills are when kids write with their letters really big. That also can be a motor issue, but sometimes it's a visual perceptual issue as well. Also when kids write words and they don't space between them, or when they have trouble with line placement. And so you see the kids that maybe write really big and their sentences go up the side of the paper, that may be a visual perceptual issue. Some things that we work on to address those visual perceptual skills and visual motor skills. I like to use a lot of mazes, dot to dot. Jigsaw puzzles are great for that. Copying block designs, you'll see in the picture there. I'll a lot of times use popsicle sticks to work on imitating those alphabet letters. You can do all the capital letters pretty much either with alphabet sticks, straight sticks, or you can use Chanel stems, or we used to call them pop cleaners that you can get. You can curve and have the kids do the letters that way. Cutting is another good visual perceptual and visual motor skill. especially cutting out different designs. That works on that skill as well. Tracing, you can use glue and make different designs, and the child can use manipulatives like buttons or pom-poms and form those into either letters or whatever design you've made. Also, stringing beads and doing the threading is also works really well on those visual perceptual skills. Some things with older kids, it's sometimes it's hard to correct those skills. And so if I'm looking at a second, third grader that has trouble with spacing and running their letters together, running words together, then we may recommend different kind of paper. And so you can use grid paper, graph paper, you can use paper that has highlighted lines. You can use paper that has raised lines, and that gives that input to be able to stay in between the lines. There's a lot of different ones for that, but typically I would recommend to speak with your occupational therapist for that kind of recommendation. The next area that we'll talk about a little bit is the proximal stability and those core muscles. So that's just those muscles that help you sit upright. So if you think about those kids that you may have that just lean over on the desk all the time, maybe they complain about being tired, they're always holding their head up with their hands. Maybe these are the kids that wiggle a lot, that even fall into the floor. Those are kids that may be having an issue with their proximal stability or their core strength. Some things that we look at when we're thinking about that core strength or proximal stability is looking at different kind of seats or different kind of writing surfaces. So sometimes we might use a ball to sit on, sometimes we might use a wiggly stool or a seat cushion, an air-filled seat cushion to help. And sometimes just having that little bit of instability helps the child sit up more straight. The other things we recommend may be laying in the floor to write, using a clipboard and laying on their belly. Sometimes we'll recommend just standing up even to write. Other things that you can do at home to address those core and strength and proximal stability are just any kind of outdoor play, climbing playground structures, also pushing and pulling, swinging, those kinds of things work really well. The other areas that impact handwriting are attention and motivation, and these are what I typically say are pretty challenging to address. Attention and motivation can be variable depending on the task, and one of the things is sometimes children aren't motivated to write because they don't feel proficient at it. So sometimes it's an issue of their hand skills. So when we work on developing their hand skills, they become more proficient, and then they're a little bit more motivated to complete the task. Some ways to address that would be the same picture from before, which is just the alternate seating options. Again, maybe having the child stand up to do their writing, or using, sometimes we'll put bands around chair legs to have them have a little bit of movement. Sometimes we'll recommend decreasing their written work expectations. Sometimes we'll recommend using technology, dictation, things like that to help lessen that workload of the writing. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about some myth busters. And so these are just things that we hear a lot. The first one is that my child is ambidextrous because they switch hands or they use both hands all the time. Well, maybe it's really rare. There's not a lot of people that are true ambidextrous. So it may be the fact that your child is just not crossing the middle of their body. That's one of the things that I typically check and ask the parents to check for. So are they eating with one hand more than the other? Excuse me, are they using a worker hand? So holding one hand as a stabilizer and the other hand as a worker. I also look at other skills. I'll ask parents, do they use one leg more than the other, to try to just get an idea about dominance that way. Um, Typically, what I recommend when you have kids that are switching hands is I tell them to start and finish with the same hand. And then also just to kind of practice crossing the middle. And so maybe have I even have them sit on their hand and reach over and pick up something across the one side of the body to the other. Um, with the crossing midline and the switching hands, if they're over probably about 5 or 6, you might want to talk to your healthcare provider about a referral for an OT assessment if that's impacting their school performance. Another myth buster that we'll hear a lot is that my child reverses their letters, so they must have dyslexia. Well, maybe, but dyslexia is a learning disorder. Reversing letters is typical up through a few letters, that is, up to about first or second grade. So it may just be an issue with letter formation. Maybe they just have trouble with those specific, the B, D, P, Qs. It may be that they just are having trouble with just uh, the reading skills. And so it just may be a number of other issues and not a true dyslexia. But if you are seeing your child and they are reversing probably more than like 3 or 4 letters up above, probably first or second grade, again, that may be something that you might want to talk to your healthcare provider about and looking at possibly a occupational therapy referral. The next myth buster that I have is just related to the pictures that I showed before. Is my child holds his pencil differently than I do, so they may need a special gripper. Well, maybe. It depends on the age of child. Again, it's really difficult to correct that. If they're not complaining about their hand being tired, I typically don't recommend changing that. If they are, then I would look at, again, maybe a referral. We might can do some things to kind of work on that hand strength and coordination. The exception to that, again, is over about age 3, holding that palmar grasp. That's one that we call that's not a functional grasp when they hold it with their whole hand. And so those are ones that we would look at either an adaptive gripper or doing some sort of intervention. One last thing, not really a myth buster, but one of the things that I just wanted to mention is I often have parents tell me that they have a child that's having a really difficult time writing. And the first thing that I'll ask is what their reading level is. And so my statement that I usually say is we really can't expect them to write much higher than their reading level. In other words, if you have a child that's in 4th grade, but they're reading on more of a 2nd grade level, then they're going to have a challenge with writing those long and lengthy paragraphs. That's going to be a challenge for them. It's going to be hard to copy words. If the words themselves don't have meaning, if they're not reading some of those chunks of words. And so that's just something that I see as a big challenge. So we really need to think about reading level impacting that writing level as well. Some resources, just a few that I like. It used to be called Handwriting Without Tears, but now it's called Learning Without Tears. That's the first one. They have a lot of information about handwriting and even technology, keyboarding. The Inspired Treehouse is another good website for just development and handwriting, fine motor development. And then Growing Hands on Kids is another one that looks at more sensory based and hand skills as well. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any other questions or any feedback, you can contact me at this Becki McBride at Anna Shaw. Thank you, guys.